Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, wherever you're at in this world, this crazy planet. I'm Rodney McGilvery.
And I'm Bruce Cunningham.
And this is Ancient Mysteries Revisited on Welt 95.7 FM in Fort Wayne, Indiana, streaming at www.acpl.info/Welt, and also archived at Radio Free America and on YouTube at Ancient Mysteries Revisited.
And today's show, we are going to be interviewing a personal friend and a man that's been at one of my conferences in Arizona a few years ago, and a top researcher in many, many fields. And we will welcome right now Christopher O'Brien. Hey, how you doing, Chris?
Hey, good to be on, Bruce.
Good to have you here, Chris. I'm the co-host, Rodney McGilvery. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Rodney. Yeah, likewise.
So basically, I guess we'll start it right off the bat. When and why did you get into the research that you started with back X amount of years ago?
Well, I had an experience when I was 6, 7 years old of being close enough to touch non-human entities. So that's enough to kind of give your life a whole extra sort of context. And I've been fascinated with the paranormal and with just all manner of strange things. I'm a very location specific kind of guy. I spent many years after moving to Colorado in the late 80s. I spent many years there in the San Luis Valley documenting waves of anomalous activity, and then looking at how those particular time periods also had strange weather, unusual aberrant social behavior, strange animal behavior, all manner of things that seem to be occurring in conjunction in many times with outbreaks of anomalous activity, which could be anything from flurry of Bigfoot sightings, haunted site becoming very active, cattle mutilations occurring, UFO waves ebbing and flowing. Any number of things could possibly trigger one of these event cycles. I happen to be in one of the hottest spots in North America in the 90s, from 92 through about 2000. There were at least 1,000 events reported in this particular geographic area, the largest alpine valley in the world. And along with that, like I said, there was strange occult crime, aberrant social behavior, Native American, interesting Native American correlations, any number of attendant type mysterious goings-ons. So when I say I'm a local, kind of a localized investigator, I not only look at the weird things that go bump in the night, and I'm open to all of them within reason. Two, then looking at what's going on in the world around these events and how it's affecting people in the culture.
Okay.
Sounds like you had some pretty wild experiences. Do you want to go into some detail about your first experience when you were 6 years old?
Well, I woke up. It's one of the most, it's probably the most, I guess, vivid memory I have as being a kid. I mean, it really did change my life. I woke up and there was what appeared to be 3 vertical lines of riveting light, kind of in a, they were about 2 feet long. They were vertical. And they were shining on what appeared to be non-human entities about 3.5, 4 feet tall, about the same size as me, actually, at 6 or 7.
At that time, eh?
They were, I was in my bedroom in the basement in Bellevue, Washington. This would have been, I think, in March of '63, just before I turned 7. I couldn't really see them very well initially. All I could tell was that there were hands holding these glittering wands, or spears as I called them, because they were almost the same height as the beans, and the light was shining on them, so I could kind of make out in the dark. I could make out body forms from the ambient light shining out of these kind of rippling wands or spheres. I closed my eyes, of course. I thought I was dreaming, so I hid under the covers or something. I forget. I put a pillow on my face, and I thought I was dreaming. And I pulled it off and woke up, and they had moved around to the bottom of the bed. They were kind of over towards the side, towards the bottom, but then they had moved around directly in front of me. Oh, wow. And so, of course, the first thing I did was I freaked out and dashed out of the room, rounded the corner, hit the stairs, went up the 10 stairs, and was, which is where our front door was. And I was going to, do the U-turn to go up the other 4 stairs to my parents' bedroom, and they were sitting at the top of the stairs waiting for me. Either that or it was a different group. I don't know. All I know is 3 beings with possibly one hiding in the back that was slightly taller were there at the top of the stairs, and I had no choice but to run through the kitchen. I was going to go out the back door, the kitchen door, and run around the side of the house, the backyard, to go to my parents' room because they had their own entrance back there. And I opened the door and bam, I ran right into the screen door, which I forgot my dad had put on. And that definitely, that's when I really knew that I wasn't dreaming. I don't know why I didn't go around the back. They may have headed me off. I may have changed my mind. I may have wanted just to get away. But I ended up running down the driveway, through the hedge, big laurel hedge that my brother and I had made our own little secret passage to the neighbor's house. And I ran through that, and then I ran up there, across their lawn, up to their front door, and was banging on their door because I wanted them to let me in so I could call my parents and tell them stick men were after me. And, well, basically. And they never answered the door. So I remember running to the next neighbors, and there was a big, huge lawn that separated the Richards from the Barker's house. A really, a couple 100 feet, almost a football field. They had a beautiful lawn with a big, huge, giant oak tree. And the Richards, the first neighbors, had a street light as a light in their driveway. And I remember thinking, wow, if they're still following me, let me stand out here in the middle of the yard and let them come through the light so I can get a good look at them. Because at this point, I really, I've been seeing them in the dark, illuminated by those things that they were carrying. And here we are outside, and I have a perfect opportunity to get them lit up. So I waited with plenty of elbow room out in the middle of the yard, and this is what really freaked me out. I know this is hard for people to believe, but they came to the light, and they stood at the edge of the light, and I was able to see them pretty well. At that point, they were dirty white colored, kind of a grayish color. I don't remember their eyes. I think I've blocked them out. I don't think they had big diamond, the almond-shaped eyes. I think I would have remembered that. But anyway, I can't remember their faces. But they approached the light where it shone on the ground in a pretty definitive circle. And they turned sideways and came through the light, but they had no depth. They were like pieces of paper turned sideways, coming through the light.
True stick figures.
Exactly. Yeah, and they were extremely anorexic. I mean, their arms are the size of my thumb, I mean, they were really spindly, which is what really freaked me out, obviously. But then when they turned sideways and had no depth, I mean, that I just ran. I hightailed around the front of the Barkers, banged on the door, and the last thing I remember is their porch light coming on. And my sister found me, she says, maybe 20 minutes later. I think it may have been longer. But she found me 5 houses away out on a porch. She looked around the neighborhood for me and then took me home. And she said I was totally freaked. I wouldn't go down into my, bed in the basement. She said, okay, you can sleep with me. She was 18, I was 6. She was much older than me. And so I got into bed with her, and she said later on, in my sleep, I tried to nurse her. So that gives you a sense of how traumatized I was.
Traumatized, and
Yeah.
Did you
So-
tell her what happened?
Yeah. Oh, of course. I told the whole family.
Oh my.
And of course, my parents. Oh, you had a nightmare and you
Yeah.
were sleepwalking. Of course.
Right.
I said, well, what about the bump on my head from running out and hitting the screen door? I mean, tell me that didn't wake me up, and then describing everything that happened. My little brother believed me. he was 5.
Yes.
But no, my parents, no, they at least they claim they never believed me. I talked to my sister about it years later in the 90s, and I said, "You remember that time when you had to go find me out there?" And she goes, "Oh," she says, "How can I forget?" She said, "You were crazy. You're out of your mind." And I said, "Well, what did I say?" And she said, "You said stickmen were after you." And so she remembered it with some detail. So, I mean, this is back in '63.
Yes, I guess.
Believing you after your research and everything you've been through?
They wouldn't talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
They just wouldn't talk. My dad had experiences in the Coast Guard watching UFOs go in and out of the Straits of Juan de Fuca on his brand new radar unit in 1946, 47. And he told us about it several times when we were kids, told stories around the dinner table and stuff. And then, when I got involved in all this stuff, he totally denied that he had ever said anything like that. And which pissed me off. He never admitted. He had experiences right before Arnold as a Coast Guardsman in Puget Sound. So,
Yeah, that same time period. Yeah.
Yeah, same time period. He was in the Coast Guard 46, 47, 48, I think. So I don't know.
Well, it probably baffled him. He probably didn't believe what he was seeing himself.
Well, yeah, people, especially people who are fairly religious, as my parents were.
That's true.
My dad was. Stuff like that just rocks their world. My mom was really ahead of her time. She taught me years later when I was 10, 11. She started teaching me about the I Ching and Buddhism and
cool.
some other progressive things. She was a dowser. She could douse for water, and she was way ahead of her time. I must sort of preface that story by saying that I wasn't allowed to watch TV. I was only taken to see, kids' movies, and I was only allowed to watch Lawrence Welk and Ed Sullivan Show.
Oh, and Bonanza after that had to be Bonanza after Ed.
I wasn't allowed to see anything with violence or sci-fi. Forget it. No way. So, I was really, until I was about 8 or 9 years old, I was led a pretty fairly cloistered life and wasn't really that exposed to mass media and stuff. But when I was 10, I remember seeing the headline on the National Enquirer, "Flying Saucers Killed My Horse." And there was a picture of Snippy the horse on the cover. And I remember bugging the hell out of my mom to buy it for me. And so she did. And I remember that was the first time I'd heard of the San Luis Valley, where the Snippy case occurred in 1967. This would have been when I was like 10.
Now, the San Luis Valley, is that where your book, The Mysterious Valley, is mainly located?
Yeah, completely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Because I read that book many years ago there, and one of the things I like about your writing is you keep a skeptical term in a lot of what you write, which I really appreciate.
Well, I'm open-minded, but my brains aren't falling out. I do try to ground what I say and how I say it in the facts, with the facts, and with data if possible. That's why later on we're going to talk about the UFODAP project, but that's why I've gotten involved in attempting to do hard data acquisition, shall we say, of unusual events, especially aerial ones, and we can go ahead and talk about that later.
Yeah, well, I like what you had just said. I wasn't aware that when you did your research for the Mysterious Valley that it wasn't just that area, that you're talking that everything seemed to be in chaos flux, not just what you were researching.
Well, yeah, I do mention in there on when strange things were going on in the environment, cops chasing weird criminals, unusual amounts of roadkill, for instance, lots of animals running in front of cars over a weekend, um, weird weather. And then strange societal behavior. Everything seems to come to a head when there's a wave of UFO sightings. Everything in nature and plus nature seems to freak out a little bit.
So it's some kind of a frequency involved, I think.
Possibly.
Yeah, so it sounds like.
Jury's going to be out on that. A lot smarter people need to look at my data, a lot smarter than I am, to maybe glean some interesting patterns, correlations, clues that might explain how all these things are connected. I'm convinced. My fourth book, Stalking the Tricksters, I came up with a unified field theory, trying to explain an interrelatedness between various paranormal phenomena. And the one thing that seems to be fairly consistent between all of them is the ability to shapeshift. And of course, shapeshifting is one of the primary abilities of the trickster of ancient and modern times. And so I did a book on the trickster, which I feel is a mechanism that seems to tie divergent and supposedly separate paranormal phenomena together.
Now, what do you mean by a trickster? If you want to explain that a little bit to our listeners.
It's one of the many archetypes that we all share around the world on a collective unconscious level. In other words, the god, the goddess, the child, the mother. These are generally faceless entities. Oh, okay. The shadow would be the most primordial. All cultures are afraid of shadows or have some traditions and legends about shadows.
Yeah, like a shadow people.
Symbol. Yeah, like shadow people. It's an archetypal symbol that we all share around the world. These are very basic building blocks of human understanding and human belief. And so the trickster is the oldest of these and the most prevalent of these, but it's also the first one that has a face, that you can see facial features on examples of the archetype. All the others are featureless in terms of their face, similar to those entities that I saw. I can't remember their face. And so whatever it was operating on a really deep, ancient level of collective unconscious awareness. I'm pretty convinced of that.
Yeah,
and so
that's anyway, like I said. It's ironic you say that, because that seems to be a standard when anybody remembers something, is everything except the face.
Yeah. And some people, depending on whose ugly mug you're looking at, some people the only thing they remember. It's like, man, I've never seen some guy that weird looking. So, it works both ways. But basically, what I'm saying is the trickster is neither male or female. It's not young or old. It's not self-aware. It doesn't know that it exists. It's amoral. It's like a little kid hitting his little sister on the head with a baseball bat and having fun, jumping up and down and going, "Oh, this is so fun." He doesn't realize that he's going to kill his little sister if he keeps it up. So the trickster is amoral, and if it's amoral and it doesn't have self-awareness, then it doesn't have an agenda. And what it does is it stumbles around and it accidentally does things that benefit humans. Like Loki gave us fire, the fishing hook. Prometheus gave us fire. These are ancient trickster forms. Raven gave us light out of darkness. The copy gave us dry land out of the ocean. So these trickster figures from around the world, the most primordial of the form, gives something to mankind for its benefit inadvertently, and then gets punished by the gods for doing it. So that's one form. And another primordial form is the animal, the anthropomorphized animal. Coyote, of course, is the most famous trickster. There's the spider, the giant hare. There's various other, the spider in certain
in Africa,
Central African.
Yeah, in Africa, the spider is everything. There are legends and there's stories. My
Anansi.
Yeah, my nephew was in a play about that character actually here in town many years ago.
Yeah, Anansi. And then the Navajo, the Dene, who were originally from Mongolia, they also have a tradition of Spider Woman, which is extremely important part of their pantheon of deities and sacred archetypal symbols. So anyway, the trickster, because of that shape-shifting ability, pretty much all paranormal phenomenon can change from one thing into another. And so if you have that shape-shifting ability, then the trickster's going to be involved. And then that, to me, is a connecting causal, possibly, element that connects seemingly divergent paranormal phenomena together. And no one else has ever attempted to do this, to come up with a commonality and then actually come up with something and explain it. And it's amazing to me that
that makes a lot of sense, Chris. It really does.
People, I'm the Rodney Dangerfield of the paranormal.
I like that. I like that.
I don't get any respect when it comes to the largest database ever collected from a single geographic region. I was funded for 2 years by Lawrence Rockefeller. I could go down the list of things that I'm very proud of, and everybody just ho hum.
Well, it sounds like you get some respect.
Yeah, well, I guess when you're talking about that database, I guess we're going to move you on to Stalking the Herd. I remember your presentation in Cottonwood a few years ago, and I was completely amazed of the amount of years and research that you did on the animal mutilations.
Well, no one else is ever going to attempt to write a book about the mutilation phenomenon that looks at it from the place of our relationship with cattle. The book basically starts 30,000 years ago with the first artistic representations of anything by humans, and of ancient extinct aurochs, the predecessor of the modern cow, and then goes all the way forward in time to 2 weeks before I turned in my manuscript, when we had our most recent mutilation case in 2014. And I look at how our relationship with cattle has morphed from a very holy, sacred, symbiotic relationship with both the bull and the cow. And then most of the cow worship goes to the east into India. Most of the bull worship stays in the west. We still see vestiges of it today with bullfighting and rodeo and other things. Rodeo is the only sport, where the animal is also in competition with other animals, and has winners and losers. Not many people know that. When you go to PBR, see the professional bull riders, the bulls are actually competing as well.
That's interesting. It's not just man versus beast.
Yeah, when I was a kid, my father, we used to go to many rodeos actually when I was young.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so I take a look at our relationship with cattle to place the mutilation phenomenon here in the modern age into context. It's very important to realize that every second we unceremoniously, ritually slaughter a head of livestock in this country. So, we mutilate a lot of cows every day.
I guess. Beef, it's what's for dinner.
Yeah. Well, the beef lobby is the largest, most powerful lobby you never, ever hear mentioned by anybody, except if you're Oprah and you make a stupid faux pas and say you're never going to eat another hamburger again when you're doing a show on Mad Cow, and you get a $2 billion lawsuit the next day.
Yeah, exactly. Wow.
Pretty much. A little litigation there.
Yeah, well, she got out of it. They threw it out of court, but it cost her $1 million. So, just for the record, I love beef, but I won't eat it if I don't know where it comes from.
Yeah, I remember you were saying that a lot of your research in the cattle mutilations was possibly government related.
Yes. pretty convinced that a sizable percentage of true high strange cases where the animal was killed somehow and then disfigured with intent and intelligence, out of those cases, I think a high percentage is probably the beef industry or a combination of the government and or the beef industry really being concerned about the potential outbreak of prion disease on our food chain, mad cow disease, which is a species jumper, as they know, and the two new variants of Creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease, which is the version in humans, mad human disease. Those variants, for some genetic types in the human gene pool, there's up to a 40-year incubation for onset of full-blown symptoms of prion disease, which is 100% fatal, and it mimics the same symptoms as dementia and Alzheimer's and other neurological diseases that have to do with loss of motor function, loss of cognition, and then ultimately loss of metabolic process or breathing or heart. Your brain forgets to tell your heart to beat because it's turned into a Swiss cheese by this misfolded protein called a prion. Largest, I think that to me would be, if I had to look at a percentage, that would be the largest motivation, I think, and behind at least a portion, sizable portion of these cases. Most of them are going on in South America right now. Very few are happening here that are being reported. South America is the only place where these things are being routinely reported, but that's not to say that we still don't have cases in North America. We do, but not like we did in the 70s when everybody was reporting them. Everybody was up in arms because of the helicopter sightings and because of stonewalling by the government. I cover all this in the book. It's a case history. It looks at the unfolding of the 70s and 80s and 90s and 2000 waves, week by week, month by month, year by year. It took 22 years to research.
Yeah, I remember you telling me about that it took 20 plus years. That's phenomenal in its own.
Well, I was able to get access to all the major databases, and I'm the only one really that could pull that off. The only one that I didn't have access to was, with her help, was Linda Howe, who refused to cooperate. So I had to use other sources for the cases that she reported on, and had to use her name way too many times.
Now, what do you think the motivations behind the cattle mutilations are?
Well, I just said checking for the outbreak of mad cow disease in the food chain. Also, you can detect levels of residual environmental radiation. Okay. For instance, from 100 above ground nuclear tests. The areas downwind and downstream of where we utilize uranium from weapons labs, national labs, power plants, nuclear power plants. Enrichment facilities or uranium minefields. If you go downwind and downstream, those are the areas that are hardest hit by mutilations. And David Perkins came up with that observation in '79, and neither of us think it's by accident. Also, there's also that element of societal manipulation as well. Nobody has ever talked about this. And, big beef has consolidated the beef industry from thousands of small little ranches that existed in the 70s. And 80% of the ranchers that had mutilations in the 70s no longer are ranching. They've been gobbled up by giant agribusiness and large beef producers. And so, I have cases where a rich rancher mutilates the cattle of the little ranchers next to him to try to intimidate them to sell out and sell him their land. That's one theory that very few people talk about, if any. For sure. And there's cases where one group will do cases where another group's doing them just to throw investigators off, red herring cases. We have evidence of that. We have tons of cases where the animals, generally we don't know how they're killed, right? We don't know how they die, except for the cases where they've been shot with firearms. There's a lot of mutilation cases that Linda won't talk about, that any of the other investigators won't talk about, where the animal has been shot with a firearm to kill it, and then they've been mutilated.
Okay.
So that's something that I don't know if you guys have ever heard of an alien walking around with a 30-06, but
I guess getting back to that, what percentage of cases did you find that appear to be possibly UFO related, if any?
Yeah, just a small percentage. I would estimate 2 to 5%. Out of 200 cases that I personally investigated, 40 were definitely done by somebody or something, if you will, for the sake of argument. Generally, it looked like a sharp cutting instrument, like a scalpel, that was used to do the case. And out of those 40, out of 200, eight, maybe 9 were high strange. So do the math. That's what, 4%.
Okay.
That's way lower than I expected to hear.
Yeah. Those are the ones that are like hair stands up on your neck. Like, what? WTH or WTF, man? Right. What is this? Scary ones, the ones that kind of keep you up a little bit, maybe that night. The other 38 or 32, rather, definitely something did that. That's no scavenger.
How does like the high strange element compare to something that just seems man-made or done by another rancher?
Well, in 2 cases, the animal was cut with high heat.
Okay.
In another case, there was a perfect, like a zipper, a serrated, like a
ceremonial blade of some sort or something.
Oh no, like pinking shears, those shears that cut fabric. It was like a cookie cutter type incision on one case, and a case where the animal's brain was gone with no break in the cranium.
Wow.
The entire spine and upper respiratory organs and ribs were gone. The spine was taken out in an upwards motion, but that's impossible because the hide was there. So it was ripped out from above, but with the skin still on.
Wow.
There wasn't a drop of blood. It was found in 5 inches of snow, fresh snow. There was 1 drop of blood on the rear left hoof. The animal wouldn't rot. And the 2 most delectable organs for scavengers, the heart and the liver, were both surgically excised and laid neatly side by side in the body cavity. Now that one was a weird one, believe me.
I guess.
Yeah. Another case we had with the animal, this could have been military, but Gabe Valdez, the New Mexico State Patrolman, who's pretty famous for the Dulce Gomez cases, where he investigated almost 100 mutilations over there in Jicarilla. He had a case where that I was kind of peripherally involved with down in New Mexico, where an autopsy was done on an animal that was disfigured and dead. And when they opened it up, all the meat had been cooked, like with a microwave from the inside out. And there was no appearance of it being cooked on the outside. It's only when they did the necropsy that they found the meat was cooked.
Wow.
Jeez.
Very weird.
I guess.
Yeah, that's a strange one. I could go on and on. I mean, that's why I wrote the book. It's 600. It's 600 pages, so it's got quite a bit of information in there.
Yeah,
I don't think anybody else is going to.
It sounds like.
Yeah, I highly recommend the listeners to Chris's books, Stalking the Herd. And why don't you say your other books and how to contact you and get those books while we're on the subject?
Sure. Well, The Mysterious Valley, Enter the Valley, and Secrets of the Mysterious Valley are all about the San Luis Valley, where I spent 13 years investigating, 10 years out of the 13 investigating strange goings-ons in the world's largest alpine valley. 7,500 feet in the air, and then the mountains go up to 14 from there, 13. So those 3 books are about that. Secrets of the Mysterious Valley also brings the reader up to speed from 99 to 2007, and it cherry picks my best cases and then tells what it's like, sort of gives you a blow-by-blow description of what it's like running around doing this kind of work. That's available at my website, OurStrangePlanet.com. It's a strange planet. It's our strange planet. And then Stalking the Tricksters, which I talked about before, is my kind of trying to come up with a theory to explain all this. And then my latest book is Stalking the Herd, which is a case history and examination of our relationship with cattle and a case history of the cattle mutilation phenomenon. And we also go in and look at each of the theories to explain why these mutilations occur, whether it's Satanists, the government, aliens, what have you, something else high strange. And we trace back where these theories began, which was really fascinating when you do that. I'm quite proud of the research work that David Perkins helped me do, and that was a real fun exercise. And there's a lot of interesting stuff in there, and a lot of data. And I'm working with Perkins right now on a follow-up book that's looking at analyzing all that data. So we've been working on it for 5 years.
Sounds very interesting.
And I have another book that's unpublished and 2 other books that are unpublished. So,
how far back do cattle mutilations go? What time period is the first evidence of a cattle mutilation?
Well, I have evidence from a painting by Aboriginal Africans in the Tassili frescoes in Algeria, where you see a mutilation appearing to take place. That's I have a photograph of that fresco in my book. It's I think it's about 8,000 years old.
Okay.
That would be the earliest depiction, potentially, but the earliest documented outbreak of cases that we know of comes from England in 1605. Was investigated by King James the First, and it's interesting that the mutilation should happen right when King James is beginning to translate the Bible into English, right when Guy Fawkes tries to blow him up at the House of Lords, and right when Shakespeare is finishing up Macbeth.
Wow.
Like you said, when stuff goes on, it's all going on at once.
Yeah.
Had hundreds and hundreds of sheep with their tallow and hides left behind. Of this are surely conjectures, but most would agree that it tendeth toward fireworks. Hundreds of sheep in one case, other cases not so many, that sort of thing. And it's from the official records of the court of King James. So
it's interesting because he was working on
and there's
it's interesting because he was working on translating the Bible itself, and it does seem like there's some weird animal happenings within the Bible.
You know what he did?
What did he do?
He took out all references, or the majority of references to cattle, bulls, and cows.
Oh, that makes sense because,
wow.
as you said, the bull was such an element in ancient society. I mean, from Atlantis to on and on.
Yeah, well, the cattle Huyik, which is one of the oldest cities we know, which comes from about 10,000 BC. I think 9,000. The whole culture was based on like the Minoans in Crete. The whole culture was based on worshiping. They were the most sacred things, the cow and the bull. And imagine trying to take an auroch, which is an animal that stands 10 to 12 feet at the shoulder, weighs 3,000 plus pounds, and is a wild beast, an aggressive wild animal. Julius Caesar described them as being like small elephants with horns instead of tusks. And imagine stealing babies from something like that, and trying to keep these animals contained so that you could then very patiently start to selectively breed docility into them. It's just amazing. You would probably have to dress up the cow and all sorts of finery and paint it and make it look beautiful for the right bull to mate with it.
Jeez.
So there was probably an elaborate system of ritual and stuff trying to get these animals to be bred, and it took 1,000 years for us to domesticate cattle. And it's interesting. Some of the first places where we brew beer and made wine were in that same area in northern Iran. So they probably had to get drunk before they would get the nerve to steal these orchards.
Well, I mean, you're bring that up.
Think about it.
Rodney had just taken his family to see some American bison. The ones he showed pictures of were very small, but I remember seeing a bison at a zoo that is exactly what you're saying. It was at least 8 foot tall.
Yeah, like the size of an elephant.
Yeah.
But the aurochs were extremely fast, and they had real big, nasty horns. I mean, they go out like a Texas Longhorn or a Spanish Fighting Bull. I mean, they were nasty and super, super aggressive. The last one died in the 1640s, I think, 1650s in a zoo in, I think, Poland.
Yeah, well, you're bringing
That's when
that
they
up.
went extinct.
Yeah, you brought up Minoan. I've seen a lot of the pictures of the frescoes of their ancient ritual of flipping over the moving bull.
They're doing that. There's been a resurgence of that. There's guys in Spain that are doing it now.
Wow. Instead of running with the
They're
bull,
doing
or
flips
running on
over
top,
bulls.
running on top of the bull.
That's where they came up with cow tipping, I
Yeah.
guess.
Well, I wouldn't want to be messing with no Spanish Fighting Bull.
Oh, hell no.
Yes. Well, I guess we'll move
or a
on.
bison.
I guess we'll move on again, Chris. And you had mentioned what you are working on now that is UFO related, and you'll have to fill us in a little bit.
Yeah, UFODAP. What a great project. About 20 years ago, I was thinking to myself, wouldn't it be cool if I could set up a surveillance net in the San Luis Valley? And back then there was no cell phones really we didn't have any cell phone towers. We didn't get cell phone towers in the valley till I think 2002. So there were no cell phone towers. There was no way to broadcast the signal, let's say, except by over the airwaves, by radio, or some sort of video signal that's transmitted from one location to the next. And so I kind of started to price out what it would cost to put a system in, and came up. It would cost for a triangulated system that was autonomous and self-contained. It would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Well, now we can do it for under 500.
Yeah, with the
And
technology
we can
now,
have
it's probably nothing.
Yeah, and it can operate over the internet. As long as you have an internet connection or a cell phone connection, you can operate this type of system from anywhere in the world. You could be in China operating your system in Indiana. You can operate pan tilt zoom cameras, have recording magnetometers and accelerometers or recording gravimeters, and have complete. We use the same chip that the ISS uses on board to measure all their atmospherics, humidity, temperature, wind speed, but not wind speed, obviously not up there, but humidity. And then we have a wind speed app as well. And all of the stuff has been designed, customized with software that detects motion, tells the cameras where the motion is. The cameras all whirl around and zero in on the object with the closest camera zooming in. And then we track the movement of the object with Google Maps live with GPS.
Okay.
So you have a map that comes up and shows you where the object is. You have complete altitude, size, distance, speed, azimuth, and any sort of energy expansion that can be detected.
So
either
you could kind of detect
gravity,
like the size and shape and kind of what it looks like.
Everything.
Okay.
Yeah, all that. We have 36 optical zoom, or 30, I think, on this camera in the Valley. 30 times optical zoom, not digital, not blowing up the pixels, but actually zooming in on the object optically. And then with something like this, with you need the software that allows the triangulation to occur, that detects and follows the motion. We have a bounding box like you see on fighter planes where the box moves with the target. All this stuff has been designed and is now in operation in the San Luis Valley. And we're going to be making systems available for people who want to put up their own little UFODAP system. You can use real inexpensive cameras. You don't have to use real expensive cameras if you can't afford it. We're using cameras that are about $1,400. Our system in total, once all the R&D is done, obviously, then you can put a price on it. But a system like ours, you could probably get between $2,000 and $2,500 with all the bells and whistles.
Wow,
so we're really happy. This, I don't like to be called a ufologist. I'm not a ufologist. I'm an anomalist. I look at, all the things. I don't have blinders on to one thing. So when people call me a ufologist, I correct them. Don't call me that, please. Anything but that. I think ufology is a joke. But if I was a ufologist, this is what I would be doing. I would be making a system like this and get a crack engineer who's written 10,000 lines of code and spent over 5,000 hours writing our software and get this stuff out there and start collecting data at a centralized point.
That sounds brilliant.
This is
That's a great idea, especially if you're going to make it available
everything
to
else,
the public.
like MUFON, their symposium this year is embracing the future, right? That's the theme. And every single person is talking about cases in the past.
Right, yeah.
What's wrong with that?
You're advancing research for the future. That's exactly what you're doing.
It sounds brilliant.
I'm doing real-time data gathering. We're doing real-time data gathering. Okay, that's if you want to establish in the private sector, in the public sector, or outside of the government or the military, if you want to establish scientific data about these events and these objects, then you have to be real time and you have to be gathering data in a place where this stuff is more likely to occur. The San Luis Valley is one of the hottest spots in North America for this type of activity. So if we can, get cameras set up in northern White Sands and New Mexico, over at the Jicarilla and Dulce, there's tons of places around Mount Shasta, around Mount Adams. There's a couple of places I'd really like to do in Pennsylvania, Chestnut Ridge, the upper Hudson River Valley, around Pine Bush. There's tons of places that could have one of these systems.
Well, when I first met you a few years ago, I was out there with Gary David. Gary was saying around the Prescott area in Arizona is a very high UFO viewing spot also.
Yeah, and also up in the Navajo Res too, around Four Corners. I mean, there's tons of them, but you need people in these places to be able to maintain the gear. You need people interested enough to really devote some time to it. Doing science isn't all fun and games and Nobel Prizes. There's a lot of trench work and footwork and there's a lot of dedication that needs to go into it. So we're going to be supplying the systems. We're also going to be supplying complete user support, and we're also going to be offering analytical services to help people identify true anomalous events. So I have a whole list of very, very esteemed consultants who we're going to be relying on their expertise of various elements, most importantly, analytical work on some of the stuff that we're going to capture. So, once we get this stuff in the can, get it recorded, and then we can duplicate that, a similar or near similar event, then you have what, Bigelow couldn't do in 12 years up at the Skinwalker Ranch. They were unable, number one, they didn't have really any aerial activity, very little, and they were unable to capture any of it. But all the stuff they were trying to do was playing with them. It was being the trickster. I mean, tearing wires out of cameras when another camera was filming that camera and they couldn't see anything. So, I mean, there's, plus we're sitting front row center for a military flight operations area as well over the mountains, the largest low-level flight training area in the United States, the Levita MOA. It's where we train low-level flight training for the Air National Guard, the Air Force, the Israeli Air Force, whoever wants to pay for it. So, we might get some classified stuff going by too. What? I think the government's going to want to play with this a little bit, do a little cat and mouse thing.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, when it comes to quelling stuff, not just playing with you, they want to quell everything. It seems like in arenas like that.
No, I disagree. All I'm doing is I'm an unpaid intelligence gathering asset.
Yeah, well, I said, it sounds like just a brilliant idea, Chris, to get everybody on the same page and duplicate this. Just sounds, just fantastic.
Now, if our listeners want to get involved with operating one of these systems, how does one get a hold of you to do so?
Yeah,
just go to UFO DAP, UFODAP, which is Data Acquisition Project. So UFODAP.com, it's all there. We don't have our price list up yet. It's going up shortly, but we have 40 different items that we'll be offering at a cost plus scenario, just to pay for shipping and handling and stuff. But we really want to get these things out there, and we've had people from Australia, Italy. I have an astronomer at a telescope in Italy that wants one. A group in Switzerland wants one.
It'd be awesome to come up with a local group here. I know there's some hot spots somewhat locally.
Oh yeah, I mean look at the Serpent Mound, which is only a few hours away. That would be one small example.
Yeah, down in the southeast corner of the state, there's some cool stuff that's been going on. Southwest corner as well.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't mind, I'll link you up on our website and put some of this information out there.
Yeah, certainly. And there's examples. You can see little video clips of the targeting software and the motion tracking and all that, and pictures of the hardware. And this is a true step forward. And I'm surprised that I haven't been contacted by some individuals in the private sector that say that they're been formed to investigate UFOs, but all they're doing is coming up with TV shows. To me, this is where we need to be going. And if I was a ufologist, this is what I would do.
Well, I mean, I like the idea because one of the reasons I got into the, more of the archaeological ancient mystery arena is because it's tangible. I can go and touch a pyramid where when you're talking UFOs, I can't go out tonight and just expect to see a UFO. You, with this project, appear to be making the UFO arena tangible. And I'm very impressed with that.
Well, I'm also sitting, have a front row seat for one of the hottest spot, the hottest spot in one of the hottest spots in North America. The Great Sand Dunes area between Blanca and Crestone has more sightings per capita than anywhere in the United States.
Wow, yeah.
And I can if Cheryl Costa wants to argue with me on that, that's fine. But these things are so common there that people, it's like normal for them to see a silver orb flying by. It's not a big deal. I would say 1 in 60, 1 in 70 reports sightings get reported there. It could be as high as 1 in 100.
Jeez. Well, I mean, we're sitting here in Indiana, and if you remember that movie back in '77, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where did it start? In a small town in Indiana.
That was based on a real event, by the way. That initial.
That's funny you say that, Chris. Right before that movie, there's a story I've not told very few, that myself and a friend were coming from Illinois around Peru, Indiana, in, I would say, April of 1977, and there, right above us, was a flying saucer. We pulled over, maybe a dozen or more cars pulled over. Now remember, we're like in our late teens, early 20s, and we all get out of the cars, watch this flying saucer, and me and my friend eventually just get back in our car and drive away. Like, oh, no big deal, flying saucer. Now, I got to believe if that happened today, I'd have a totally different attitude. And in that time, I have went to the Peru newspapers, I've looked at archives, I've talked to MUFON people in Indiana, and there is nothing on that event except, of course, that movie.
Yeah. One of the funniest things that I think I've experienced in my years of living there was, I made pretty good inroads with the ranching and farming communities because I was meeting quite a number of them. We're having stuff happen, so people tell other people about me and stuff, and people began to call me and feed me leads. And so one rancher who had an event happen, he said, I'll keep in touch if anything else happens. And I ran into him at the local grocery store in Alamosa, and he said, Chris, oh man, I'm so glad I ran into you. That reminds me, I should have called you, when it happened, but I know you're so busy and it was late. I said, why? What do you mean? And he says, well, this big old thing is all lit up like a Christmas tree. It was huge. It landed out in my back 40 and freaked my dogs out. And my wife wanted to go hide in the closet. And I said, no, it's all right. I'll keep an eye out. If anything starts coming over towards us, I'll grab my shotgun, And I said, well, how big was this thing? He goes, I don't know, big as a house. And I said, and you didn't call me? No, I figured you were busy, man. I know you've been running around all this stuff. I figured I'd run into you at some point. And it's like, damn. I mean, it was like he was talking about he saw a stray dog out there or something. It just blew my mind. And I said, man, anytime something happens, I don't care if it's 3:30 in the morning, please call me.
I guess. Jeez,
so that just gives you, it's people, I guess, are just kind of numb to the fact that it's unusual because it's been happening for so many generations there. I mean, I have a whole slew of reports on the Sanford River in the 20s, the oldest civilian film of multiple UFO objects was taken on the Conneaus River in August 48, I think. It was, of course, taken by the military after he showed it all over the valley.
There's that time period again, 46, 7, and 8.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and his son was a county commissioner and said, oh, yeah, I remember that movie. Yeah, it was good. They even hung around for him to change reels of film. It was great. With broad daylight during a picnic. He had his brand new Super 8 camera, I think, or 8mm camera, and UFO showed up and did flybys like the Blue Angels. They were doing acrobatic stuff.
Jeez, that's another story I got too. Is a really close friend of mine said it was a few years ago. He told me that he was in Las Vegas and he's never told anybody. And he told me about there were lights like the lights over Phoenix, and same thing. Everybody in Vegas is watching these things, and it just really never made the news. Never. And like I said, he was kind of weary of even telling me about it. So yeah, it's neat, this system you've got set up. I mean, if everybody jumps on board something like this, we don't need disclosure. We'll have it.
Yeah, we'll make our own disclosure.
Exactly. Well, just think about it. If we could get 2 events, let's say 2 flybys that we capture. I mean, this is a UFO corridor where we can see 200 miles in all directions. So imagine something flying by, boom, we log it, and we get it. 3 cameras, magnetometer, gravitometer data. And then boom, we get a second event. What can you do then?
Well, like I said, it's like instant disclosure.
If you can replicate that, then what you can do is write a scientific paper.
Yeah, that's this. Like I said, I can't say enough. I was not aware of this, Chris. I'm really glad you're on the show today, because this is something we will really be promoting out there. It's just sounds cool as it can
Do
be.
you think the scientific paper, once it is written, in theory, would it be accepted by current academia?
It would depend on who wrote it and where you were trying to get it published. As it stands now, the kinds of things that we would be doing would probably fall into the realm of optical physics. So someone like a Bruce Maccabee, you could take it to Bruce and say, okay, Bruce, here we go. Here's our data. Check it over. Who would be a good person to approach this with for peer review? And then you start a buzz going, and then somebody, I've got some contacts within the scientific community through a former Goddard Space Flight Center employee who actually was in charge of refurbishing the Hubble Space Telescope. So I have some connections at there and other connections potentially through mutual friends at Los Alamos, at Sandia. So once you get the word out there and you have the data to back it up, everybody will be interested. Now, up until now, there's been diddly squat, and the military's got it all.
Yeah, that's why many people in the arena are so obsessed over this disclosure thing. And it's like, well, if it doesn't happen, what do we do next? And it sounds like UFODAP.
Well, we're seeing that. It is happening. This Wilson, the Admiral Wilson letter that just came out. This is smoking gun stuff. I mean, they are letting this stuff out. This isn't coming out by accident. They are trying to stay ahead of eventual disclosure. They're trying they're actually saying, okay, we have been ignoring this for 40, 50 years. Now we have to fess up a little bit and at least give them some indication that yes, we are on top of this. And this whole thing with Wilson talks about official Navy and Defense Intelligence Agency interest in UFO type activity prior to 97. Oh, wow. So that's 10 years before Elizondo's bunch and the threat assessment guys. That could have been just tip of the iceberg, or it could be compartmentalized, and one hand doesn't know the other hand exists even. I think a lot of it, though, guys, really, we got to be honest here. A lot of this information has been in the private sector for decades. It's out of reach of FOIA. You can't have access to it. It's like us trying to get Bigelow to publish. I dogged him for years, and finally they started publishing papers. The only, the squeaky wheel syndrome, I think, is finally bearing some fruit. I think, with all these shows and people becoming interested, the old guard dying off, more younger people are involved here. People are more accepting of the whole concept. You're not going to be rocking, entire groups of people's religious beliefs and the stuff that they've been afraid of. Because, back in the 40s and 50s, maybe that would have been a concern. People just gotten over World War II. They're not going to tell them about some potential new threat. They're going to try to keep it, under wraps. So word's coming out. You say disclosure. We've been undergoing disclosure for quite some time.
Well, didn't Ronald Reagan publicly speak about UFOs? I remember he was about ready to come full disclosure back in the 80s.
He had a sighting on his campaign plane. I think one time he was running for governor, and then, of course, he made the statement during his negotiations with Gorbachev. He said, "Wouldn't it be nice if instead of thinking of ourselves as Russians and Americans, if there was a presence out there in the cosmos." That we found out about, we'd become Earthlings, that sort of thing. Yeah. We'd forget about our national boundaries
and be humans.
One as well, he said that a couple of times, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, Carter went in, he had famously seen and reported a UFO, and he went in, and everybody thought, oh, he's a disclosure guy, and he got shut down.
They
just said no.
Right. We have always wondered if somebody, when they become president, they don't sit him down and say, okay, this is real, but you're not going to talk about it. We've always wondered that.
Oh, I'm sure of it.
I think that they do have some awareness. There was one thing that happened that I didn't see anybody pick up on, and I don't know. I didn't really follow up on it myself, but because it was so fantastic. I saw an article, a small article, that said in one of Snowden's comments, he said something about that the president gets an almost daily briefing of coming and going activity at the bottom of one of the trenches, the Marianas, or one of the real deep ocean trenches along a rift valley where there's geothermal activity, that there's objects entering and leaving the inner Earth out in the Pacific, and that we're aware of it, and we've been monitoring it, and the president supposedly gets briefings. Now, this is supposedly from Snowden, and if I remember correctly, it was a like Huffington Post or somebody. It wasn't just some,
a more respectable publication.
Not like what's some of the ridiculous ones that are out there. Team was a secure team, or before it is news, or half of kind of fly by night,
or half of Facebook anymore. It appears.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody sent it to me, and I was like, "Whoa, that's cool," because I've always thought there's other tenants in the building.
Oh, I mean, when you say the inner Earth, I mean, we could have another show, probably many hours, just on Antarctica alone. Definitely. I mean, my gosh, the operate
that goes along with some stuff we talked about Frank Joseph.
Yes. Yeah, we could.
Yeah, I've always been a real. I've always had a suspicion that there's something going on below our feet, and in the valley. I mean, I interviewed an old Hispanic miner who helped dig the tunnels around Los Alamos, and his son became the postmaster general of the lab, and his grandson was my guitar player. And he was an underground demolition guy, and he told his family that I'm not sure exactly what the date was. I think it would have been the early to mid '60s. He was expanding the lab, which is built right in front of a huge supervolcano. Most people don't know that the caldera that sits there has lava tubes that go all over the place underneath the Jimenez there, and so what they've done is they've used those and expanded them, and he was digging with his buddies, and they broke into an ancient tunnel system that was obviously manufactured, and by the amount of mineralization they could tell it was about 10,000 years old. Well, they took off and started following it. And it got down to, it started going, south by southwest or southeast. And then it got to an intersection, and one tunnel looked like it was going to go down towards the Sandias and Albuquerque, and the other tunnel looked like it was going to go to the southwest to Mount Taylor, where there's also a lot of lava tubes. And they stopped there and turned around and went back, because right then that they'd be late clocking back in at the end of the day. So went all the way back, and of course they mentioned to the supervisor, "Hey, check out what we found." And they got separated, grilled, told never to talk about it. They were all put on different teams. They'd been working together for a while, and so they were all split up. And I said, "Well, what did they put you onto? What team did you go to?" He says, "Oh, we're the ones that dug the tunnel to Dulce."
Oh, wow.
Yes. Well, that's fun. That's funny you bring that up. I mean, we all know, ancient tunnels are everywhere. You look at Cappadocia, Peru, we can go on. But right here in Fort Wayne, Chris, they just purchased this borer, mega high tech that can just build new sewer systems, with just technology, boring like something out of a sci-fi movie. And it's right here in our small little city. So the possibility of building tunnels all over the world are absolute. I mean, it's right here.
Well, they awarded patents for nuclear-powered submarine back in the mid-'70s. And actually, the company that developed it was in the town I went to high school. interestingly enough. But what it does is, it instead of grinding through like a big giant wheel with a lot of diamonds on it, instead of grinding through the rock, what it does is it heats the rock up. It's nuclear powered. It heats the rock up and then deposits the glass, basically, that's left behind as the reinforcement for the tunnel. And so you have tunnels that have 6 inches of glass for walls and ceiling.
Wow.
and they're round and filled with fused material. And my buddy Chris, my guitar player, said when he used to, during the summer, help deliver mail in the labs. He was on a bike underground. He just zip around and drop people's mail off. He said, yeah, there was one tunnel that he wasn't allowed to go down that looked like it was made of glass. So, he volunteered that before he knew anything about it. He just said, yeah, I thought it was kind of weird.
Well,
whatever.
I just recently found out that right here again in Fort Wayne, there's a tunnel system that has been around at least since Prohibition, that goes all over the downtown area, and it's humongous. And it could have been for the illegal booze from Canada, or it could be much, much older. I was just made aware of this in just the last couple of months. So it's
these nuclear subterranes in solid rock can go 7 miles a day.
Wow.
And then they can go further in sediment.
Jeez, I mean, that's you could do the whole country, the whole North America, South America in a matter of just a couple years. My gosh.
Yeah. Well, Richard Sauter, he dug up some pretty interesting stuff. You haven't heard that name in a while, I bet.
No, not in a long time. Why don't you fill the listeners in on a brief version?
Well, if you want to know anything about the government's involvement underground, there's only one book really, and that's Underground Bases and Tunnels. What's the government trying to hide? Because is the title. And then he wrote a second book that kind of goes into more information and other subjects as well. But that's the granddaddy book of them all.
Okay.
And I mean, he found, he combed through every appropriations bill in Congress for decades looking for expenditures having to do with building underground facilities. He could not find a penny that had publicly been spent on building unacknowledged 129 facilities that we know about. And then the whole idea of a maglev train that's been in existence that zips around between military bases and between important locations. Well, it's pretty interesting.
Jeez,
it boggles the mind. Our people sell humans short. They don't. They say, oh, the pyramids must have been built by aliens, or humans are very, very ingenious and extremely inventive and creative
and resilient.
And people, and people have got to remember that not to sell human ingenuity is short.
Yeah. I think most of that, Chris, when they put the alien thing in there, I think the main thing is when you look at like the Great Pyramid, the structures in Peru, Nam Madal, on and on, some technology was used that has been lost or forgotten. I think, when we're told slaves and ropes built the Great Pyramid, that's beyond ignorance. I mean, and you've been to Peru, I believe, and there's just no way that those 200-ton blocks were carried from the other side of the mountain. I mean, there's some technology lost or missing.
All you have to do is look at the Cyclopean. It's the ground layer, the big giant platform layer at Baalbek.
Yeah.
Those are 200 or 2,000 ton trioliths or whatever they're called.
Trilithons.
We're talking trilithons. These things are just. Yeah. There's no way we could move those today. There's no way we could even quarry them.
Yeah, and that's with all our technology. So what has been lost or what is missing in how they did these things.
Yeah. So there are exceptions to every rule.
Yeah, for sure.
There's got to be some sort of technology that's no longer extant or accessible. But that's why these subjects, kind of are so, to me, so intriguing and so wonderful, and it just makes your brain work, trying to figure out some of this stuff, and then the whole idea of getting out and actually doing the field work.
Yes.
I elected myself, into that position, and it takes a lot of effort, a lot of energy, and you really have to manage your time well. And obviously, networking is important too. But people listening, if you live in an area that's got these 5 things, this is my formula.
Okay.
If it's got tradition of ancient culture, sacredness, or type of archaeology, like in the mound culture there, if it has an area with a mound, if it has some sort of fairly nearby government presence, and if it has a history of unusual events that has occurred in and around the area, and the legends and myths and the history of the place, and if it also has some sort of strange or unusual geophysical property, like Wilshire is a natural battery because of the alternating layers of clay, water, and sand. And some areas tend to attract strange weather. There's weather type anomalies tend to occur where there's geophysical variations. Places where the Earth's magnetic field is in close proximity to itself, high, real strong force and weak force in the field. If they're in close proximity to itself, that tends to be an area where you see UFO activity, for instance.
Oh, well, that's like we could bring up the Serpent Mound, which is the Great Serpent Mound of Ohio, that's on the edge of a 5-mile wide meteor crater, and the energy and the magnetics are through the roof.
Yeah, that's a famous site, by the way, a meteor impact site. That's an area where it'd be great to have cameras up. These areas, I think, are special, and they do allow for some form of access to something or somewhere else. I'm convinced that these areas all have doorways that go from here to some sort of parallel or maybe time-based thing. I'm not sure, but I found that in the valley. I've actually identified a specific spot that things come and go from. I brought a very famous investigator there for her to check it out, and she was impressed.
just so to speak, impressed. I like it.
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, Rosemary Guiley. I gave her a tour of the valley, and we went to that spot, and I just barged in. I didn't sit quietly for 5-10 minutes like I normally do, and then ease into it. It's like bull in a china shop, and boy, we, in manner of speaking, it was suggested that we leave.
Oh, wow.
Or it's like, where have you been? Also a little bit of that too, because I hadn't actually been to that spot in a number of years, and we definitely got some signs that we stirred things up. Let's put it that way.
That's a good thing too.
Are you getting a lot of current UFO activity picked up through your cameras right now?
Geez, I lost my mic. Am I on the I'm on the computer mic, huh?
No, it sounded good.
Okay. Is that better?
No, that's it. Both were good.
Yeah, you're clear both ways.
Okay, good. We have had a couple of things that we've seen that we're not sure what they are, but until we really get it analyzed, until we get the second camera up and really functioning, we had a problem with the tower location that we put the second camera on, and we're having to move it to a location closer to the first camera. So instead of being, I think, 14 miles away, we're only going to be 6.5 miles away. It was too far away to cover adequately the area we wanted to cover. We were trying to hit the backside and the front side of the valley, and we're going to have to concentrate only to the east instead of trying to really open it up to the west. You kind of have to look at the map on the website to get an idea, but we are moving it to a better cell tower location that's much closer to where the action is. Let's put it that way.
Well, you're learning as you go.
Well, yeah. And then the third camera location, we haven't decided exactly where that's going to go. It's either going to go against the mountains at the Great Sand Dunes Oasis, which is right outside the national park, or it's going to go in Crestone, which is north by about 30 miles. So it depends on where that third location is going to go. We're still not dialed in on it. We need to get the first two so that we can triangulate.
Yeah.
And this second location, it's second tower, he's going to be 60 feet up in the air. So we're going to have 360 degrees from up there, except obviously right directly behind the camera where the tower is. We're going to be about a third of the way up the tower. So it's real nice and stable. We can't have vibration. If we go up further, you get too much wind vibration. And so we're going to be down where the tower is its strongest at about 60 feet,
which is still good ways up there for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm real excited because this is, like I said, this is one of the premier hotspots in North America, and we have a front row seat to where a lot of the activity takes place. So
it seems like a breakthrough idea.
So, yeah, I'm real excited just hearing about this, Chris. I got to believe that this could really grow, and this UFODAP could be all over, and everybody on the same page can maybe solve a big piece of this mystery.
Yeah, well, it's all the same software, and it's all everything's written in open source Python. We're trying to be as transparent as possible. We're not trying to make money on this thing. We're trying to, at least cover our costs.
Of course.
And then, have it as pretty much, anybody that wants to get involved, we've got the tools to do it.
Well,
so,
like I said, I know I'll be a broken record, but everybody on the same page. This could be huge. This could be
that's a huge milestone.
The paradigm buster.
Yeah, and see, all this stuff can come in through the same portal, and then we can have mirror sites and stuff. What we eventually want to do is have for nighttime, go FLIR. Of course, that for each site that'll be an extra $30,000 to $50,000 to go long range, forward looking infrared. People think FLIR. Oh, you could just put one of those FLIR things that you see on the ghost shows. No, we need these large, very expensive instruments that are able to detect heat 20 miles away.
Yeah, the ones used on the ghost shows are very minimal. They don't.
That's
that takes your $2,500 doable investment up to a totally different era.
Oh, definitely.
Arena. Because the $2,500, you get a group of people, $2,500, Chris. That's very doable. You could do that in a matter of weeks. So yeah, it's very, very, very nice.
Let's put it this way: if we have some success with this, I have a feeling money is going to come out of the woodwork.
Oh,
definitely. If you start showing actual proof.
Yeah. It's a whole new ballgame then. And that's what we're shooting for, is to demonstrate the viability of the concept and of the gear. That's what's important. We have slew rates that can follow objects pretty quickly. So, it's a labor of love at this point.
Yeah,
Ron Olsch, our chief engineer, is just he's a computer scientist. He's also an engineer, and he's really designed a very elegant, very easy to use user interface, and the software, the control panel software for operating your gear is extremely intuitive and easy to use, simple.
Yeah, no, this is, like I said, I'll use that word brilliant again, and we will do everything, we will do everything in our power to get the word out here. Because this is just something that could be done even by me in the Philippines, because there's even sightings there in recent years.
As long as you have access to the internet.
Oh, well, that's pretty well anywhere anymore. And if they do this 5G, we may all die within the next few years. But by gosh, we'll have lots of good, powerful signal.
Yeah. Then we could have 4K cameras operating.
Oh, there you go. Oh, that'd be amazing.
Jeez, I guess.
Well, on that note, that's pretty much the show for this evening. But it's been a pleasure talking to you, Chris. And you got some exciting research, and I'm very intrigued myself. And I'm going to share your info out on our website and hopefully get the word out. Yeah.
Again, Chris, thanks. And
UFODAP.com.
And if you get back west, while I'm here in the States, I really still want to get out back to Arizona, Colorado, the Mysterious Valley. I still want to see Mesa Verde. Maybe we'll get a group together and try to find Kincaid's Cave, because you've yet to find it.
Okay. All right.
Well, thanks again, Chris.
Yeah.
We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay.
I hope. Possibly. Could be.
That was Christopher O'Brien. I am Rodney McGilvery.
And I'm Bruce Cunningham.
And this is Ancient Mysteries Revisited, FM Welts 95.7 FM in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and streaming at www.acpl.info/welts, and archived at Radio Free America, and on YouTube at Ancient Mysteries Revisited.
And our website, www.ancientmysteriesrevisited.wordpress.com.
All right, we'll see you again next time.